Hi, I'm Dan Reed. Welcome to Car Corner. Today, we're going to be looking at battery service. When the weather starts to get colder and the temperatures start to dip, one of the first signs that you might have an automotive problem is that you might suspect that the battery in your car has failed or has died. Batteries have a lot of misunderstandings about them, and we're here today to help clean some of those misunderstandings up. First of all, a lot of people think the battery actually runs the car, and the battery doesn't run the car. All the battery does is actually run the starter of the vehicle, and once the vehicle is moving at that point, the battery really kind of takes a back seat to the car's electrical system, which is actually powered by the alternator of the car. At that point, once the car is running, the battery's sole function is to really act like a voltage spike absorber, almost like a high-end power strip for a piece of audio equipment or a capacitor or something like that. And then when you turn the car off, the engine stops. And then when you get back in the car again to start it again, obviously we have to have a reserve of power in the battery to again crank the starter and drive the vehicle. So the battery itself is actually really no different than any other type of battery that you would have for maybe a cell phone or a small electronic device or even just disposable AA, AAA 9-volt battery. It works the same way. It just kind of does it on a bigger scale. Now the car's battery for most modern cars since about 1957 is a 12-volt electrical system in the car. Some vehicles today, hybrids, while they may have a very large, powerful battery pack that can be up to 330 volts, the fact is the car's headlights, the radio, and those type of basic accessories still run on a 12-volt system. So a 12-volt battery has been around for a long time, and even in a lot of the newer high-tech cars, it's still just a 12-volt battery when it comes down to actually getting the car moving. So with the 12-volt battery, what we have different cells on the inside of the battery, and I have a cutaway I'll show you in a little bit. Each one of those cells generates about 2 volts. There's 6 cells, and so that comes up to 12 volts. The difference, though, is if you can think about a 9-volt battery and how small it is, 9 really isn't much more than 12. It's only 3 volts difference. The difference is in the number of amps, or the current that the battery can produce. A 9-volt battery can't produce much current. It can maybe do about 4 amps, okay? However, a car battery can do up to 600 amps. Now what this means, and I'm going to take my gloves off here for a second, is that you can safely touch a car battery, okay? They usually have a rubber protective cap on the positive side of the battery, and that's because the battery has 2 terminals, a positive and negative, and the negative side is actually attached to the whole body of the vehicle. So the entire car is the negative side of the battery, or what we call in the industry as ground. The positive wire runs to each individual electrical component and then is sometimes grounded back through the body of the car. So ultimately the electricity runs back, it runs out of the positive side, down to the component, through the body of the car, and then back to the negative side, so we have a complete circuit. So it's a good idea to have some type of protective cap over the positive side of the battery, and I'll show you why in a second, but I just want to show you that you can safely touch both terminals of the battery with your hands, and you're not going to get electrocuted. That's a big misconception. People see sparks or fire and they immediately assume that you're going to get electrocuted by the car battery, and you really can't. Even if your hands were a little wet, you're still not going to feel anything, okay? But the protective cap is here because while the 9-volt battery certainly can't really hurt you, it won't burn you, the amount of current or amps that we have from the car battery, this one being up to about 500 if it was freezing out, is a lot more. And let me show you why we have things like a protective rubber cap over the positive side, because if you happen to touch the positive side to the negative side, all of the current in the battery tries to run from one side to the other, and we can have some issues. So one of the first safety things that you have to be aware of when you're working with the battery is it's a good idea to wear safety glasses, okay? The second thing is you should have some type of glove on, and the reason why is because there are acids in the battery, specifically sulfuric acid. It's not 100% sulfuric acid, It's about, I want to say 68% sulfuric acid, and the rest is actually pure water. So if you happen to get the acid on your skin, it's not necessarily going to just eat through your skin like it would in a horror movie, but it will cause some mild burning, and you certainly don't want to get it in any open cuts or your eyes or anything like that. That would be extremely painful and dangerous. So the gloves are a good idea. And let me show you exactly what can happen when you don't follow the rules with a car battery. One of the other rules, and this is probably the most important rule, is that you should take off any type of jewelry that you have while working on the car battery. This goes for big necklaces, watches with a metal band, rings, anything like that. If you happen to reach down into the vehicle and you accidentally make contact with your metal jewelry between the positive side of a component and the ground of the battery, you'll actually really burn your finger badly, to the point where you definitely will never do that again. And what I have to demonstrate that is I have a hot dog. Now this is a raw, uncooked hot dog, and I have a little hose clamp tied around it. And this hose clamp could be anything like could be a ring, could be a metal bracelet, it could be a watch band, it could be a necklace, it could be anything, okay? And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take this connection and I'm going to do something known as a dead short on the battery, okay? And this is not something that you should really try at home. We do show this to our students to just kind of demonstrate the destructive power of a car battery. And I guarantee, once you see this happen, you're really never going to want to wear jewelry working on a car again, okay? So just keep an eye on this. I'm going to put the battery right here on the ground. So that would be maybe me reaching in down to change the oil on the oil filter. And then I'm going to take the positive side right here, and I'm going to contact this. And when this happens, it's going to be interesting. So just keep watching. All right, here we go. Yeah, and how long did I have that contacted there for? Not very long. In fact, what happens in the real world, unfortunately, is that your watch band or your ring or anything like that actually welds itself between the two terminals, and then you can't move your hand away. So you basically have a burning piece of metal stuck on your finger. And this actually burned through the metal of the hose clamp very quickly, and it's still sizzling a little bit. But you can see that the hot dog is badly burned. So this could be your finger, all right? So please make sure that you take your jewelry off before you start working on a car battery. So what we're going to do with this car battery is we've been having some problems with it, and we're going to take it out and we're going to clean it and we're going to test it, and I'm going to show you how to recharge a car battery, and then we're going to put it back in the car and see if it starts the vehicle. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to take it out is just a couple simple hand tools. And a good basic rule of thumb is to first, get a good overview of the battery. We should always disconnect the negative cable first, okay? And the reason why is because since it's the entire electrical system of the car, we don't want to have any chance of the two terminals contacting one another. If we just take the positive side off and then put the positive side back on, there's some nasty things that can happen with the car's electrical system. The other safety point is, obviously, like we just saw, don't ever use the top of the battery like a tool tray when you work on the car. If you have a long socket or a wrench and you lay it on top, or it rolls or bumps in between the two contacts, obviously you can have a little disaster like we just saw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the negative battery cable first and then disconnect the positive. Oops. Wrong size. What did I just do wrong? Are you paying attention? I hope you were. Yeah, I pulled the positive cable off first. I got a little ahead of myself there, but it's okay, all right? I'll just have to make sure that, as a rule again, the negative cable comes off first and it goes on last from the car's electrical system. So, good you caught me, all right? Once we get the cables off, we're just gonna tuck them out of the way. And the next thing is the battery should have some type of a hold down strap or fixture. And that's actually a really important thing that a lot of people kind of just throw away or lose. And if you happen to lose them, they're just a couple bucks to replace them. And here's why they're important. Batteries don't like vibration. There's a lot of very thin, delicate plates of lead inside the battery. If we subject the battery to a lot of external vibration, the plates actually vibrate together and they touch. And when they touch, they shed against one another and actually start to disintegrate. When that happens, when we start to lose those plates are what help generate our electricity. And you wouldn't want to put a brand new battery in and then just have it start to basically disintegrate itself. So it's important to make sure there's a battery hold down fixture. There's another reason. The battery, if we hit a big enough bump, will start to shift around in the engine bay. The battery can fall into the engine bay, landing on a hot exhaust component or a spinning belt, or what's even more entertaining is when the battery actually hits a bump and then jumps up and sticks to the hood, because now the hood has created a direct short, and the battery actually catches fire and the car burns to the ground. So yeah, you want to make sure that's on the battery there, okay? So take off our battery hold down. Okay, and there's my battery hold down strap. And you know what you're looking for with these is if they're rusty, you can clean them up and hit them with a little coat of spray paint. And if they're missing, obviously you want to replace it. And again, these are just a few dollars from any auto parts store. Okay, so the battery at this point is loose. Another mistake a lot of people make is at this point they just kind of manhandle the battery out of the car and they might actually tip it against themselves, and you don't want to do that. While you can't see it, there may be an invisible layer of battery acid on here, and what will happen is when you lean it against yourself, it will actually start to eat your clothing away. And if you've ever worked with a car battery, when you put your jeans or your shirt through the wash, when they come out, suddenly there's a whole bunch of holes burned in it. And that's because the acid actually reacts with the laundry detergent and disintegrates cotton clothing. So what we're going to use is something called a battery carrier. Now, these come in different types of styles, but what they do is they come down and they basically clamp the side of the battery, and then we can safely lift the battery out and move it to where we're going to go. So I'm going to hook up my battery carrier here. Okay, and just lift the battery out. Oops. There we go. And now that I got this out, I'm going to wheel the bench over and we'll start testing it and cleaning it. Okay, so now what we've got is we've brought our battery over out of the car and I've got a couple things here to show you how to clean the battery, and then we'll move on to some other batteries and what makes them a little different. First, I want to show you something about this battery in particular, and a lot of new batteries have this. And what it is this little dot, this little colored eye right here on the front of the battery. This dot is a way for the parts person or the counter person to determine if the battery is still charged while it's in the building before it actually goes into the car. This little charge eye, which is what it's called, is basically a miniature battery tester. And the problem is it works on something called specific gravity. And as the battery is in service in the car, it's no longer reliable. The little ball can get stuck. And so the color of it being orange or red or green or yellow isn't really a useful indicator to tell the owner of the battery that it's still a good battery or not. So once this is in the car and you've driven around with it, you can't use this little eye anymore to tell whether or not the battery's good. Okay, I just wanted to clear that up. So the other thing is before you start cleaning a battery, you need to have a couple things on hand. One, I like to put the battery in a plastic container. And this way, when we clean it, we're not going to have any residue running off under the toolbox or the floor or anything like that. The second thing is you're going to need a battery terminal cleaner, which is a little tool that has a brush on one end and then a little internal brush on the other. And these things are just a couple bucks, and sometimes they come in a metal or plastic shell. You can buy battery terminal cleaner. They're all pretty much working the same way. And what it is it's really a mixture of compressed water and baking soda. There are some other brands that change colors when they hit battery acid, and they're sort of fun. But the fact is you can actually make your own battery cleaner out of just some bottled water and plain old baking soda. And I'll show you how to do that. The other thing is the actual battery terminal end. Now this would normally be attached to the cable. One thing that can happen, and if you remember from earlier I said that batteries don't like vibration, is that when you go to remove the battery cable from the vehicle, the cable itself can actually get stuck, and even though you've loosened the bolts, the cable might be stuck. And what a lot of people are tempted to do at this point is really start beating up on the terminal or the battery with sometimes a hammer, and that's a really, really bad idea. This battery terminal is actually just attached with a little bit of lead solder to an internal lead frame, so it's all very soft metal. The proper tool is this. This is a battery terminal puller, and this is not an expensive tool. They run less than $10. And the way it works is you basically open it up, you spin it open, and once you've loosened the battery terminal, you place it down over the top of the terminal, and then you would tighten it down. And as you turn it, the screw that comes down the center actually forces the battery terminal apart from its connector, and then you can remove it safely. And it does it easily, and it does it very quickly, and most importantly, it does it without damaging anything. So that's an important thing to remember. The other thing that can happen is sometimes the new cable, when you go to put it on, won't fit over the battery terminal, and we actually have a tool for that, which is this, and this is called a battery terminal spreader. And the way this works is you put it into the battery terminal, you squeeze the two ends, and it actually separates the battery terminal, so you can make it fit again and reshape it to the natural shape of the battery terminal itself. Okay, so let's start cleaning our battery. I'll demonstrate the store brand battery cleaner on the negative side, and then we'll make our own mixture on the positive side of the battery. So I'm just going to shake this up, and I'm just going to spray a little bit of this around the negative battery terminal. And you can see that it's foaming a little bit. That's because it's reacting with some of the acids that are actually naturally leaching through the plastic case around the metal post of the battery terminal. What this will do is this will actually neutralize the acids. And it's a good idea. I actually really like to kind of spray the entire battery case. And the reason why is because the acid tends to come up and then it runs down the side of the case. Some older vehicles have a metal battery tray that the battery sits in, And over time, the battery tray will actually start to rust and corrode and actually won't support the battery anymore. So if we're going to make our own battery terminal cleaner, we're just going to take some store baking soda, put it in a small cup, and then we're just going to take some bottled water and pour that in. And you know, it only takes a short amount of money to actually make this. And you just kind of want to stir this around, and then we're just going to paint this on top of our battery terminal. Okay? This will neutralize the acid the same exact way as the other one. In fact, you can, if you listen closely, put my microphone right there. I don't know if you can hear it hissing or not, but it is reacting with the acids. And we're actually going to paint the entire battery surface lightly with this and neutralize as much of the acid as we can. So once you've done that, I'm just going to pour that in there. Once you've done that, what we have to do is we now have to use our metal battery brush, and we're going to use that, and we're just going to place that over the terminal. And it's going to clean the battery terminals for us. If you see that the battery terminals look black, that's the color that lead is when it corrodes. Just like silver jewelry, lead actually corrodes. So we're going to clean up our battery terminals real nice. Use this end, use this and clean up the terminal end of the cable. So now that our battery's clean, what I need to do is I need to rinse all of this off. I can't leave this on the battery. So I'm going to take some fresh water and just gently pour this over the top of the battery. And I'm not going to get electrocuted, I'm not going to start a fire or anything like that. And I really want to just make sure that I get as much of the cleaning material off the battery as I can. When you're cleaning the battery, make sure that it stays upright. Again, there is acid inside the battery, and we don't want that acid to leak out. So make sure the caps always stay upright. Don't tip the battery all the way on its side or upside down to fit it in a sink or something like that. So now that our battery's clean, we actually need to dry it. If we do leave the battery wet, what will happen is there is actually a little bit of electricity traveling across the wetness of the battery. The battery will actually discharge because of that wetness. So we'll just take some rags. I recommend using something you're probably not going to wear to a business function to do this, because there still may be some residual acid left on the battery, and in that case, we don't want to make sure that we don't destroy our good clothing when we do this. All right, so we're going to dry the battery off best we can. All right, and a safe, easy way to clean the battery, or I'm sorry, a safe, easy way to dry the battery is, you know, just if it's a warm day, just let it dry off in the sun, and it'll dry up any residue in a couple minutes. Okay, so I'm going to put this aside, and I'm actually going to put this on the ground, which leads me to a myth. So just give me a second here. Okay, one of the great myths about batteries, and even if you never really worked much with a car battery, you may have heard somebody say, whatever you do, don't put it on a concrete floor. Don't put the battery on a concrete floor, because a concrete floor will discharge the battery and then it'll never work again. And that's true, but a lot of people don't understand why it's true. And batteries are like people. They don't like extreme temperature changes. And what happens when you put a battery on a concrete floor of a building is the floor, especially a garage, is not insulated. What happens is in very cold weather, the bottom of the battery is cold. The hot air or the warm air inside the shop used by the heater is going to actually heat the top half of the battery. That temperature differential between the top and the bottom of the battery is what actually causes the battery to discharge quickly. It's not anything magical because of the concrete or anything like that. This case is made of plastic and it doesn't conduct electricity, but it's the actual temperature change that will cause the battery to fail. Some people like to put the battery on a piece of wood, and the reason why that prevents the battery from dying is because it elevates the battery off the floor and insulates it, so the battery doesn't die. So that's the true story behind that. When you go to replace a battery in a car, one of the things that you're going to have to look for is the type of numbers on the battery. Batteries come in different sizes. They also make universal fit batteries. I'm not a fan of the universal fit batteries at all. You should use the right size battery for the vehicle. If that battery is not available at that store, go to another store and put the correct battery in the car. Yes, they're all 12 volts, but the difference is the physical shape of the battery may not fit properly. It may rub against something. It may not work with that battery hold-down bracket. The other thing is the numbers on the top of the battery, this one right here that says 425 CCA, that stands for cold cranking amps. And that's a measurement used to make sure that the battery can deliver a certain amount of voltage at 0 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 seconds. Now, the reason why that's important is because on a day like today outside, it's pretty cold, and you want to make sure you have a battery that's strong enough to start your car. The more CCAs a battery is, the better it's going to be able to do in cold weather. It's not going to damage the electrical system, but if you buy the cheap battery, you may be doing yourself a disservice, and it may not have enough CCAs to actually start your car when it's cold out. So make sure you're buying the right size battery and the right rating for your battery for your vehicle. The other thing is you may be wondering, how do I know how old the battery is in the car? Most car batteries are going to last about 5, maybe 6 years. Maybe on the odd run, you'll get 7 years out of a car battery, but pretty much regardless of the brand, they're going to last about 5 years. One of the ways that you can tell how old the car battery is by looking at what's known as a date code on the battery. Now, this date code on this battery says A8. And what that means is that this battery was manufactured in January, the first month, letter A, of the year 1998. Okay? So this battery is very old. Okay? No matter how much we clean this battery and try to bring it back to life, it's done. Okay? It's gone for good. Newer batteries, like this one, after 2000, they added a 0 digit and they got a little bit smarter. They realized that the lettering system wasn't so good for knowing what month it is. So this battery right here with the yellow dot says 806. So we know that this battery was made in 2006, and 8 is August. So this battery, it's 2010 at this point. This battery is pretty much at the end of its lifespan. Okay? So to go back and talk about the construction of a battery, first of all, we usually have some type of cap that goes across the top of the battery, and that's so we can add water to the battery. Now, when we add water to the battery, you can't add tap water, and I'll show you how to add water to a battery in a second. But this battery's been cut away, and we can see that there's plates on the inside here, and I'm going to actually turn this battery around so you can get a better view of the plates. These are those lead plates that I was talking about, and you can see that they're very soft, flimsy material. If we subject the battery to a lot of vibration, these plates and cell packs are going to disintegrate and fall apart, and our battery's going to be done. Okay, so I'm going to put this on the ground now. The other thing is that batteries generally come in 2 different styles. They come what's known as a maintenance-free battery, and then they come as a non-maintenance-free or a regular battery. The maintenance-free batteries, I'm going to tip this one up, you'll see that the doesn't really have access to the covers or the plates in the front of it. This battery is sealed for life. In other words, we can't add any water to it. We can't check the water in it. And consequently, aside from cleaning it and making sure it's installed properly, there isn't too much we can do. This battery, though, has removable caps. And with the removable caps on the battery, we can pop them off and check the water level on the inside. The other thing is some batteries, like this one, may have a rubber hose off of the back of them. And what this rubber hose is this rubber hose is a vent. When batteries charge, they give off hydrogen gas. Another important rule about batteries is when you're around a charging car battery, don't smoke around it and make sure that you don't generate any sparks of electricity, because if you do, the hydrogen gas will explode. And batteries, unfortunately, do explode. And when they explode, it's quite messy. So this hose is used on some vehicles where the battery is actually inside the passenger compartment of the car. On a lot of European vehicles and some modern domestic cars, the battery is either located in the trunk or underneath the back seat. There has to be some way to safely vent this hydrogen gas to the outside of the car so that way it doesn't fill the passenger compartment. So if you happen to see a rubber hose attached on the old battery, make sure you hook it back on, and then make sure that the rubber hose vents properly to the outside. Usually it actually just goes through a hole in the trunk, a very small hole, and that allows the hydrogen gas to escape. Okay, so I'm going to put this battery away.